What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be joined by Darian Vaziri from Locked On Clippers to discuss the Clippers and Kawhi Leonard adjusting to his new role off the bench while he gets back up to game speed. Plus, what should the Clippers do with their point guard position? Is John Wall making a case to be the new starting point guard for the LA Clippers? We're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting football and for the start of a brand new basketball campaign. Find out the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every single game that you can get your hands on. As always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every single sport out there. They've got you covered for NFL, they've got you covered for college football, NBA, MLB postseason, all the fighting odds, UFC, MMA, boxing, you name it, they've got you covered over at BetOnline. Right now, you can go take a look at who the odds-on favorites are to be this year's NBA Finals matchup. You got to predict the exact matchup right now. The favorites at the top of the list, Boston Celtics versus Golden State Warriors, a repeat of last year's finals matchup. Then after them, you got Boston Celtics versus LA Clippers at plus 1,700. You got the Bucks versus Warriors at plus 1,750. The Bucks versus the LA Clippers at plus 1,900. And then rounding out the top five, the sleeper candidate here, you got the Brooklyn Nets versus Golden State Warriors at plus 2,100. So for all of those odds and more, be sure to check out betonline.net to learn more about the trends in action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Joining us now is Darian Vaziri from Locked On Clippers. You can follow on Twitter at DimeDropperPod. Now, Darian, the Clippers were looking pretty solid through a 2-0 start of the season, and then they were humbled a little bit by the Phoenix Suns in their third game of this calendar season. But the big storyline this year, right, is the return of Kawhi Leonard and just his role so far. It was a little, odd, him coming off the bench, but I do think that, that's the safety measure, right, to just make sure that he can get worked back into shape and not re-aggravate the injury or anything to that effect. What has Kawhi looked like since hitting the floor? What does he look like in that role coming off the Clippers bench, and how they've kind of utilized him so far?
Well, he's played two games, obviously one against the Lakers and then the one just now against the Suns. And he's actually been a real bright spot. He's looked a lot quicker, more aggressive than I expected starting the season coming off the ACL tear. He's been one of the really encouraging signs for the Clippers. I mean, in this Suns game, they lost by, I don't remember the final score, but 18, 17 points. And he was actually a positive when he was on the court. So even though single game plus minus isn't always the best indicator of things, Kawhi Leonard was positive on the court tonight for the Clippers, and he's been a really bright spot the first two games that he's played. The only thing is, I just can't wait to see him play even more because he still looks like every bit of that best player on the Clippers. So the sooner they can have him starting, the better you'll see this Clipper team.
Yeah, Kawhi Leonard against the LA Lakers in the season opener, 14 points on 6 of 12 shooting off the bench again, just playing 21 minutes. It looks like his minutes are kind of capped there right at about 20-ish or so. Maybe not like a hard cap for Ty Lue and for Kawhi, but just, around that 20 or so minute mark. And then against the Phoenix Suns, coming off the bench again, Kawhi Leonard managed to have 11 points on 2 of 6 shooting against the Suns. He did get to the free throw line a ton in this game, those 7 trips to the charity stripe, knocked down all 7 of them while he was there. And Darian, he had this one block at one point in this game against Mikal Bridges where he just gobbled up the basketball. He basically blocked it and took the ball away from Mikal Bridges. Do you ever have those moments when you're watching Kawhi play defense and you're just like, how does he do some of the things that he do on the floor? Does he do some of the things that he can do on the floor?
Definitely, especially with his big hands. Sometimes he has these moments where he just grabs the ball and snatches it away from people. It was very apparent, and it struck me the first 15 or so games after he was traded to the Clippers. So that was a real bright spot. One of the few bright spots in the Suns game, for sure, Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, there might have been some, maybe the bright spots few and far between in the home opener loss against the Phoenix Suns, but maybe an encouraging sign. The game before that, Paul George exploding for 40 points against the Sacramento Kings. It feels like there's this dynamic between PG-13 and Kawhi where you want to look at Kawhi as the alpha, the number one guy on the team, but it feels like all the discussion around the team, the messaging around the team, the mentality is that those two guys are both the guy, right? So how important is it for Kawhi, or I should say, how important is it for PG to understand that he is, that he needs to go out there and be Paul George for this team to be at its best?
It's very important. I think it's a little harder when you have a situation like the first game and the third game, he's starting and Kawhi's coming off the bench. And then the second game, he's just starting and Kawhi's not playing at all. But I think considering Kawhi is not starting at all, he needs to start every game like he's Paul George, like he's the best player on the court. And in many games, he is the best player on the court. He needs to be very aggressive. And I think against the Suns and the Lakers, he was not aggressive enough, did not try to get to the basket as much. But in the Sacramento game, he caught the ball in the mid post a lot. And when he catches the ball there, he oftentimes doesn't even need to take a dribble. He can just rise up over the top of guys and hit that jump shot. And then one or two dribbles, he's at the rim and has a chance to elevate. He still has a great vertical. But when he starts out behind the 3-point line against some of these quicker guards that, he's taking away his advantage in ways when he's trying to dribble against them at the top of the key. And you got guys with good hands and good lateral ability. And I think I like when he gets the ball in the mid post better. And you saw it against Sacramento, against Phoenix. It was back to the stuff we saw against the Lakers. And Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, these guys did a really good job on him.
We talked about this a little bit before the season, you and I, Darian, about this point guard position for the Clippers team, right? Reggie Jackson's been the guy who's been there kind of like steadying force at times. And then you bring in a guy, John Wall, kind of their we won't say John Wall, marquee acquisition over the offseason, right? But an important piece added to this Clippers team. Given the way that these two guys have played through preseason, through the first handful of games now, is the bench role the right role for John Wall on this Clippers team, or do you envision a situation further down the line where maybe they change things up and inject Wall into the starting lineup?
I think it's time to inject him into the starting lineup, and I honestly want to see it happen in the next game. I was team Reggie Jackson going into the preseason because of what you just said, that continuity, and I figured John would like handling the ball more in the second unit without having Kawhi and Paul George out there. But I underestimated just how great John Wall still is. He may not be his Washington Wizards self, but he is significantly better than Reggie Jackson, and he's better on both ends. And besides that, he's the only player on the Clippers that seems to be able to consistently take guys off the dribble and get 2 feet in the paint and get to the basket. Norman Powell and Reggie Jackson have not done a good enough job doing that. Kawhi Leonard has never been known for his burst. He's more of a mid-post, mid-range kind of guy. And then Paul George, he can get to the basket, but sometimes he doesn't like to be aggressive enough. John Wall, the one thing about him is he really likes to get downhill, and he deserves to be starting at this point because the thing is Reggie Jackson is very inconsistent. He's the typical role player. He has his hot and cold nights. And when you start out cold and you're a starter, it can be tough. And what happened against the Suns, you're down 20 points, 15 points by the time John Wall even checks back in the game. I was in attendance at the Suns game, and he was the biggest reason why the crowd got energized at any point was John Wall's presence on the court. So I think it's gone to the point where he's just too good. He may need to start, and especially when Kawhi Leonard's coming off the bench, he does need to start because it was with Norman Powell playing the way he's playing right now in a really bad slump. If Reggie Jackson also plays poorly, then that's your starting backcourt just not playing well.
Yeah, I noticed, there were a handful of times in that Clippers Suns game where Wall just completely took it straight to the Suns defense, driving it like into the chest of DeAndre Ayton, other guys, the bigs on the floor for Phoenix, really kind of trying to force the issue at times, even when there wasn't really a driving lane there, just making something happen. And then the other thing, right? I mean, Wall was the closing guard on the floor until Ty Lue and eventually, the Clippers waving the white flag, giving up, throwing in the rest of the bench guys, with about 2 or 3 minutes or so left in the game, give or take, given the lead discrepancy that the Suns had at that point. But I thought it was interesting that Wall was the guy out there kind of closing the game out for the Clippers, so maybe it does become a thing sooner rather than later that Wall finds himself in that starting lineup. To you, Darian, right now, who are the best 5 that the Clippers can put on the floor, their best 5-man lineup right now?
That's a good question because the Clippers have so much depth that it's hard to say, but obviously it would include Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, and right now it definitely includes John Wall. If I had to choose 2 other guys, Marcus Morris Sr. so far this season has absolutely earned that spot. There were a lot of people, including myself, talking about the potential of trading him, feeling like his presence on the team was a bit redundant. But it looks like every single one of those people, including myself, was dead wrong. He absolutely deserves to be that 4th guy. And, based off the first 3 games, I'd say Ivica Zubac. And one of the biggest reasons why is the Clippers were talking about small ball, and it's been very successful in certain runs for the Clippers in the past. But there are certain teams that it's very hard to play small ball against if you're not going to rebound. And Phoenix is one of those teams that absolutely defeated the Clippers on the glass in this game. And DeAndre Ayton is a skilled center. You can't just put smaller guys on him. And he exploits that. And I think so far, what teams have noticed about the Clippers small ball unit is they can switch everything on the Clippers, because Ivica Zubac is not there to take advantage of any mismatches or anything on the offensive glass. So I'd say Ivica Zubac is that fifth spot, a true center. I've not seen enough positive play in the first 3 games to make me say that a small ball lineup is the best lineup for the Clippers right now. Ivica Zubac has to be in there, especially considering his performance against Sacramento.
How much longer will Kawhi Leonard be coming off the bench? How much longer will John Wall be coming off the bench? Those are 2 talented names to be able to say, hey, they're coming off of our bench if you're Ty Lue and the LA Clippers. But of course, you're going to have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Clippers. Darian, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thank you.